Welcome to the Cardboard Herald podcast. I am Eric, joined by my lovely, wacky co-host Jack. Look at him. Look how wacky he is.
Look at me. Look how wacky I am. Eric, it's been forever.
It's been so long. Hello to all of our listeners. We're back. The podcast is back in full force. I got married again. There's the ring for everybody to see. Ooh. I think you can see that. Cause that's good. I love it. But I had a lot on my plate, and that is done now. I'm still married.
Yep.
I'm not saying the marriage is done. Marriage is still going on.
Marriage intact. Lot on the plate is consumed.
A lot on the plate has been consumed. It was a lovely day. Jack was there. He had a lovely vest on.
Yeah, I did.
We celebrated back up in Juneau, which also means that I got a lot of games played with Jack. But before we get into what we've played this week, a couple bookkeeping things.
Housekeeping Corner.
Housekeeping Corner. What do I do? When I did Lore Corner, I did sepia tone. Is there like a color for Housekeeping Corner, do you think?
Oh, God. I was just watching you'd know all about this, but I was watching a Studio Binder video that was all about a super trendy type of lens that is being used a lot, especially in like A24, like indie films, that kind of stuff, where everything in the center is in focus and then everything on the periphery in a circular pattern starts to bleed focus, and I'm trying to think of what that is called. It's a specific type of lens, and that's what we're gonna do. That's what we can do. That's gonna be really make it happen
for me to figure out in post.
I love it.
Thank you for that, Jack. We're gonna figure it out in post. But welcome to the Housekeeping Corner. We have a Patreon. We've had a Patreon.
We do.
For a good long while. Jack's been running it. I'm going to start taking over some responsibilities on that. And that includes, we're going to be doing a game giveaway. At the moment, the system we are operating under is that we're going to be giving games away every 3 months. For every month you are subscribed to the Patreon, you will get one entry into the raffle. And if you don't win, those entries just carry over to the next. But if you do win, your entries are reset back to 0. We think that system encourages people to stay subscribed for longer, but also gives everyone a chance to win right off the bat. So you aren't...
Here's the deal. We get a lot of games. Like, we get a lot of games for review. We get a lot of games that are just like, hey, these publishers have these excess games. If you can review them, great, whatever. And we get a lot of games that we really like. Some we don't, some we do. But even still, our shelves can only hold so much. So we have a game problem. And we also want to reward our patrons because they're the ones who are helping us be able to operate. They help us have the financial support, but also that's a show of commitment, of faith. That's a measure of success, that people are going beyond just mere consumption and believe in what you do. So this is kind of looking at how we can creatively make sure things are getting into the hands of the people who support us the most, how to do that in a fair way. And what we're looking at is doing, for every 15 patrons, we will be giving away one game per quarter. And you'll be in this lottery system that will hopefully encourage people to stay around, but reward people who have been waiting the longest, if that makes sense. And it's anyone who's giving at least $1 per month. If you are giving $10 per month, you are in the same level of entry as the person giving $1 per month. That's not to say we love you any less at giving us $10 per month or whatever, but it's really because we want to recognize that anyone who's giving anything, that means the world to us. So this is a way of helping support you. Ideally, we're going to have a list of a bunch of games that if you're the winner, you can just choose one of those games. They're going to be used. but they are used gently. They're not going to be
Jack
completely
and I
rocked.
are pretty good. There have been a couple. Furnace got messed up. My copy of Furnace got messed up big time. But everything else I own is in pretty good shape, all things considered.
Yes.
But yeah, this is a thing that we have talked about doing internally for a while, and we are bringing it to everybody now. So if you're interested in joining the game giveaway, please take a look at our Patreon, see if it's something that you would like to subscribe to. We're going to start trying to make more posts there and being a little bit more active there to make it a more reasonable value proposition, I guess, is where we're at.
But we're accruing those entries starting now. So anyone who contributes in July will have an entry, and then August and September. If you're contributing all 3 months, that'll be 3 entries. Now, for full transparency, we've had the Patreon for a long time. One of the things I've talked to Eric about is I am terrible at monetizing things. Like, I actually think I'm a pretty good salesman on a lot of things, but when it comes to like selling myself or the Cardboard Herald or something that I'm really creatively involved in, it gets awkward and I get bashful, and like I actually want to not just make it transactional, but something that is mutual in the way that I would want to see it out of creators that I really like and that I really support. So we're not going to do crazy hard sells, crazy things. We want to make it fair and fine. And if we do merch, we want to make sure that it's something that we care about, that we would actually want to see. And, as always with our videos, we're not going to be doing, any hard sells or try to strong arm people or guilt people into what we do. But ultimately, this is a way for the channel to grow.
Yeah, so that, I think, concludes our time in the Housekeeping Corner. Unless there's more housekeeping. I think that's the only housekeeping I had in mind.
A degree of housekeeping. We had a brief pause in podcasting because we had a bunch of travel stuff coming up. We have more travel stuff coming up with me going to Germany with my family here pretty soon. Eric and I are already talking about what that's going to mean for weekly podcasting. Are we going to have co-hosts? Are we going to do another hiatus? That kind of thing. We want to make sure that we kind of are prepared to plan around this stuff in the future. So we should have some of that out of the way. And then lastly, as far as a bit of housekeeping, we have a topic today. You know what? We'll get to it. We'll get to that. At the end, we'll have some surprise, exciting stuff, kind of tangential sequel video type of thing.
Yeah.
So, Housekeeping Corner, cut off.
Great. Jack, what have you played this week? Or last week? Or any of the weeks since our last podcast, which I think at this point has been 3 weeks? Maybe a month? I think it's been 3 weeks, though.
It's been a while. And I figure as part of our discussion here, we're going to hit on some of the games that you and I really got up to. But as some aside, some other things, I played with your family.
Yes.
Poetry for Neanderthals.
Yes. Yeah.
Never played it before. Brilliant word game. Really loved that. And your family are a bunch of competitive dorks, and I love it.
Oh yeah, they are. I feel like I've finagled my way out of, like, I still am a competitive person, and I know that about myself. I still feel like I avoided like what I could have been. My
the
dad
monster you could be
is one of the most competitive people I know. My mom also not very good if she's losing. She has a streak. And I think that they went full send on Poetry for Neanderthals, which I think was the right way to approach it. It's fun. It's a fun little game. That was it's also more fun when you actually can We played it at our community board game night in Juneau at our local brewery board game night, and we could not blow up. They have an inflatable club that you use to hit somebody when they mess up, when they break the rules. And we did not blow it up because I was not going to put my lips on anything that was community owned. And I hope nobody else does. It's kind of sad. Maybe they should just leave it inflated.
Yeah, maybe. Or just get a full real club. I guess that could work.
Yeah, or just like get an air pump in there.
Yeah,
also an option. But
other than that, I played a bunch of Regicide yesterday, which was nice. It was hot on the mind because my former copy of Regicide, which is really just a deck of cards. Regicide is wonderful. You can play it with any deck of cards. Though I really like the Badgers from Mars guys that made the game, and so I like having a copy of dedicated Regicide. The artwork's great. But it was in my hiking backpack, and I forgot about that, and I took my dogs on a bike ride in the rain, and that hiking backpack got soaked, and then I was like, oh no, my Regicide, this is terrible. So then it was an excuse to just buy a second edition copy of Regicide, which is pretty much the same thing. A little bit of the artwork has changed, which I gotta actually do a comparison from my ruined deck to the new one. What specifically they did to change it up. Really, I think it's the theme of the Diamonds characters are changed. Anyway, it's a good pack of cards to have. The new box is nice, and it feels kind of like a plasticky material, so maybe it would have been saved had I had the second edition in the backpack. So, I got that. And then the only other thing, this is neither here nor there, Sushi Go. I like Sushi Go. You love Sushi Go.
Yeah, big fan.
I was working on a list of board game minimalism, like games that I think are really just awesome, that exemplify particular mechanics. So that way I could do a top 10. And I was like, I got to get a copy of Sushi Go for this. And let me tell you, I thought everywhere would have a copy of Sushi Go. Even the owners of Alaska Robotics were like, oh, yeah, we have Sushi Go. We always have Sushi Go. They did not have Sushi Go.
They lied to your face.
They lied to my face. Actually, at our board game night, the owner was like, yeah, we totally got a copy. And during that board game night, he checked his inventory and then was like, oh, God, no, we don't have one. Jack, I lied to you. Imagination Station, Fred Meyers, or Kroger for those not from the West Coast. Everywhere that I thought would have a copy of this. Hearthside Books, no Sushi Go in town. So I ended up ordering one so I can work on this video because I was like, I should probably have a copy of Sushi Go anyway. Yeah. So that's my board game story.
Great story. I'm glad that the owner was like, I made a claim. I need to double check this claim. Yeah. I just did that recently. I was at work and somebody was like, what's the name Eric come from? They're like, what does it mean? And I said, oh yeah, it's a derivation of Richard, so whatever that is. And I had that thought that I had, which was, I just said something that I have not verified since I was a child, and I don't know if it's true. And I looked it up, and that is absolutely not correct. That is absolutely not even slightly correct.
I love those apocryphal fragments from our childhood where you latch onto something and take it completely at face value.
Yep.
And you just accept it into your reality. It becomes a foundational building block of your understanding of the universe. Mm-hmm. And then you realize, had someone told you this, and as an adult, you would have been very skeptical. I don't know. That doesn't seem logical.
I don't think Eric is a derivation of Richard. That doesn't even sound similar.
Right. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Pronunciation, because you read books that were above, your speaking literacy level, and those sort of little apocryphal fragments are the best. But enough about those. What you been playing, Eric?
Let's see. We have some review copies of some all-play games, some teeny tiny box all-play games I've been getting plays of. Did
you get some Slambo played?
Fun Slambo.
Slambo is so good.
I am such a huge fan of Slambo.
I played it with your
cannot tell
cousin.
Yeah.
I just wanted to play more Slambo, and I barely knew your cousin. I was like, hey, Eric's cousin, we're playing Slambo right now. And he was like, okay. And I was like, we're waiting on him to get a drink or something, so we're just going to play this. And we played around. It was great. I played it a ton with Christina. I kind of felt bad giving it over to you. I was like, oh, I love Slambo. But I figured I could pick up a copy at a later point. Isn't it so good?
Yeah, I am such a big fan of it. I have one critique of it, and that's I wish that they included one of the little rope things that they include in Things and Rings to put around where you play cards, and that has been my go-to whenever I'm bringing out Slambo. I am now grabbing one of those little rope things from Things and Rings because it just feels so good. But it is
for the audience. It's a brand new all play tiny box game. So
super small.
I have one of their normal size ones here that you've seen a billion games come out. It's about a quarter of the size of this, and it's a sumo wrestling game where you're playing cards trying to maintain at or above 0 or at 10 or below, and all it is simple addition and subtraction from the cards that you're playing, either red to down, blue to up, and it's so easy. It's so easy to explain. It's so easy to learn, and
that was it. You just had the rules. That's all of the rules. That is all of the rules. If you're playing 2-player, that is all the rules. If you're playing 3-4-player, you get some other cards that do slightly things, like there's like a reverse direction card. There's a card that can be used as a plus minus, but it is a beautifully simple game. I love it. I love yelling Slambo whenever somebody's knocked out of the ring. You just point and laugh and go, Slambo, you have been Slamboed.
Yep. And there's this great thematic moment in my mind every time that you forced your opponent to go negative or you force them to go positive, that it's the two sumos who are locked into position, and either they gave too much force and you pivoted them and just like judoed them out of the ring, or they ended up giving in on the resistance and you were able to push them out. So it, even though it doesn't really explain what's happening, the theme really locks in with that.
It does.
Simple numerical
It absolutely
system.
does. And the art's cool, and every card has like a sumo, one of the names of the sumo wrestling moves.
Yep.
So yeah, I've been playing that. It's great. I'm such a big fan of that. I'm gonna have a review of that coming out soon. I think I've already written the script, so it's gonna be coming out soon. I've also played the other one, which is For the Emperor, which you did not play. I don't believe. Did you play?
I played it with you.
Oh, that's right. We did play together.
Yep. I like it. It's kind of battle line-ish. I mean, it's not as poppy and like immediately visceral as Slambo.
It's not as immediately fun.
Yeah.
It's
all right. It's kind of dry.
I think the other thing that I found is I don't know if it's just the way I'm playing it or the people I'm playing it with, because I've played with a couple people at this point, and there's two sides. It's completely symmetrical. One side goes first, the other side goes second. Every single time I've played, whoever has gone second has won. And I've played a number of times.
Right.
Which is a bit worrisome. It's still fun. It is still fun, but having the ability to like respond to your opponent seems to be the more powerful trait than deciding where you're going. So
yeah, and there are a lot of games that do similar things to that. The battle line is, of course, the classic Knizia's battle line.
Yeah.
But there are a ton of games where it's a quick area control over a succession of linear battles, and you're playing numerical values to each of those, and some of them might have some sort of effects. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's okay. In the face of Slambo, it ain't
in the
no.
face of Slambo, it ain't no Slambo.
Yeah.
I also have played So You've Been Eaten, which
I've never heard of this.
it came out I think like 2 or 3 years ago, maybe longer. Let me actually.
Oh wait, I have heard of this. I'm looking it up right now.
Scott Alms, which
yes,
I'm a big fan of his.
He did the Tiny Epic games.
He's done a ton. It's from 2022. But it is a either 2-player or solo or 0-player. You can just play it 0 and just do the 2 factions against one another using the rules that you would use in solo against one another.
So kind of like a Smash Brothers, just seeing
let the CPUs do what they do.
Automa's doing. Yeah,
exactly. So I played that.
Study them for victory.
I played that with Board Gaming Bud, and it's fun. I think it's fine. Like, it's not going to be my favorite solo experience, but it's pretty quick, and I think it does what it's trying to do reasonably well. It's not super deep, I think, is my bigger issue. It's just, like, there's the decisions to be made are not very complicated. It's usually one of 2 things, and you can't, like, you don't have the information to make the right call. Like, there's not enough information available for you to know what's going to be the right call, which is traditionally good game design. Like, you want that. You don't want somebody to be able to just math out what they're doing. But there's so little information that it feels like it's a coin flip either way. So it's like a tough thing of, it feels like you can't, I don't know how I would get better at that game. For either side. But it's fun. And it is a 2-player game, which, like, that's the initial attraction. Is just like, it's a 2-player game. One person plays as a monster that it has valuable crystals within its body, and the other person plays as a miner who gets eaten by it, has to extract 8 different crystals, and then wins if they do that.
Seems reasonable. It seems like with a 2-player game like that, you can really lean into specific balances. Like, you can have design that is dedicated for that sort of tight arena.
Exactly. And I think that I don't know that they're going to have more I don't know if they're going to have more monsters that you could play as. Well, because the other thing is, you could really, like, the board just connects in the middle. You could easily swap out monsters. But I don't know if they are going to be doing that. I don't think that I've seen anything. There was a So You've Been Cursed. I just saw that popped up while I was looking at So You've Been Eaten. So You've Been Cursed, asymmetric, 30-minute board game. Yeah. So they did make a separate one that is like a wizard versus, is this a werewolf?
It's 2025. If you have a marketable board game idea, someone's going to make it. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like there's very similar, or not similar, I mean, it's a new game that seems similar of a wizard versus a monster. So You've Been Cursed. I'd be interested in trying it out. I'll look into that. Maybe I'll try to pre-order that.
Do you think people who have looked at the podcast title or the video title have been waiting with bated breath, like, oh, come on, say it, say the thing, say it.
The theme this week.
You've been baiting.
we've been baiting is the theme this week is 2-player board games, and we're gonna go about this in a not necessarily a roundabout way, but we are going to be talking about what we look for in 2-player board games, what we don't want to see in 2-player board games, and then finally, we're going to kind of be discussing games that are built exclusively for 2 players versus games that play really well at 2 players. And Jack and I were discussing this, and we kind of wanted to make a top 10 list, but we think that that would be better suited for its own video, so we will be doing that at some point in the very near future. But today we are not going to be putting a list together. We're just going to be talking about 2-player board game design.
Yeah, like one of the things about a podcast is this great discussion format, and this gives us the opportunity to kind of like bring in and like let it simmer, let us kind of crystallize some of our thoughts on some of our favorites or least favorite examples of this genre. And then we can use that to make a more informed top 10 list, which, if you've been following this channel for a while, we have a lot of historic top 10 lists where it's edited, it's tight, it's, something that's less discussion-oriented and more, like we're going to get you the information, give you lots of B-roll, that kind of stuff. Whereas the podcast, it's more cash. We'll keep it a cash.
We go into tangents about me being incorrect about the origin of my name, That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
That's what we're all here for. But yeah, I think the impetus for this podcast topic is, one, I got married. I have a forever second player now. And she can't say anything about it. Also, we played a lot of 2-player games. I had like a full day where I was like, the only thing I'm doing today is playing board games with Jack. During my vacation back up to Juneau that included my wedding, I set aside a day where I was like, I'm doing nothing other than playing board games with Jack.
It was great.
It was great. I was really happy to be doing that. And we got a lot of 2-player games in, some of which I have been wanting to play for so long and just did not get the chance to do so while I was in Juneau. And then also for the Emperor and So You've Been Eaten, I've played a lot of 2-player only games recently that had me thinking about what do I want out of a 2-player board game.
Right.
So, I think we should start off discussing some of the games we did play together and kind of what we think works really well for those and what we would like to see different, and then maybe move to like a broader discussion of all games. But we played Kelp for the first time. I've been wanting to play Kelp. Jack got it at PAX Unplugged. I didn't get the chance to play it with Jack at PAX Unplugged. I just kept looking over. Great. I was playing other games, and I kept looking over and being like, I want to be that octopus.
Kelp.
I'm playing a different game, but look, Jack looks like he's having a lot of fun being that shark.
I think that there's been this trajectory in the board game world where heavy asymmetry was something that was really exciting around the time of Root, around the time of Vast, and it was something that was then aped by a lot of different board game publishers, but the nut to crack was 2-player asymmetry because these games kept on scaling up 2 to 4 players, 2 to 5 players, whatever, and it became very difficult to have stability at all the different player counts. And so the 2-player games that were coming out around, say, 5 to 10 years ago were very symmetric for the most part. And now the boom seems to be in 2-player heavily asymmetric games. And so Kelp is a perfect example of this. Like a game where it is a cat and mouse, or I guess shark and octopus game, where each side operates entirely differently, interfacing with the same board, but one is doing a deck building game and one's doing its own thing with dice and more luck, but can really capitalize on certain things and making hard choices based off of those dice. We played Kelp twice, right? And you played Octopus both times?
Oh yeah. I did not win. I was not even really close, I think, either time.
Kelp, like a lot of 2-player games, especially any heavily asymmetric game, it does reward knowledge of what you can do, and also I'm just a badass shark, so that
you were.
helps.
But kelp was really great, I think, in a lot of ways. That I think the asymmetry felt super organic. Like the fact that we were still interacting with the same board, and as far as I really need to know, it was I need to find these things without getting found. And
right,
I'm going to be revealing things, shuffling things around as the octopus. That made a lot of sense to me, and the things that I need to keep track of as far as what you were doing and are able to do is how the shark moves, what dice you have in your bag right now, and kind of just knowing what's coming up for you probably.
Right.
And so I was able to not have to really get nitty gritty into what you're doing and have to know like exactly what you're capable of doing on your turn.
Right.
It probably would have helped me if I did, but as like an asymmetric game, I feel like Kelp did a really good job of making it not overwhelming to a new player. Like, I'm still not going to be as good as you, but it wasn't, like, overwhelming for me to be like, what are all of these systems I have to know? Like, do I have to know all of what you can do and all of what I can do to play this game? Which is just learning, like, two separate board games mixed together.
What's interesting about the dichotomy between Kelp and Ironwood, which is another asymmetric two-player dedicated game that we played while you were up here, is that Kelp is, while you have cards and, as the octopus, you're influencing your deck, you're shuffling up your deck like a typical deck building game. That's not the overall core strategy. It's more on the periphery of what you're doing, and it's the interface, but it's really about the tactical decisions that you're making on any given turn. Same thing with the shark and the bag building, whereas Ironwood, you have much more dynamic impact through the cards that you're playing, and a lot more specialization that you could do, like a card-driven game where, sure, the board is paramount, positioning, tactics is paramount, but it feels more like you have a lot of varying capabilities in how you're going to progress in your turn and what you really want to do. And I think they're both fantastic games. I think they both have a ton of depth, but they're, I would say, similar levels of complexity and yet completely different feelings in how much strategy is going on in them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that they were a very fun complement to play one right after the other.
Yeah. Totally.
Because they are like much different strategy, like levels of strategy that you have to invest in.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's more or less depth in either of them.
Oh, yeah.
I like both of those games a lot. It just feels like one is that sort of really tight, any moment things could break bad. Kelp is soup sandwich at any given moment for either player. Whereas I would say that Ironwood, there's much more this progressive mounting tension that goes on throughout the game, and it's not like one pivotal decision is going to completely collapse everything.
Yeah, and I also think that it's just like the Ironwood had a lot more structure of like what you do this turn. You can pretty clearly see what you're going to be able to do next turn and so on and so forth. Whereas with Kelp, I feel like you're more trying to give yourself as many options on your turn as possible, and you don't know what those options are going to be because you're drawing into a deck or you're grabbing randomly from your dice pool and rolling them. But I think that it is a very... Both of them do what they're trying to do well. Like, Kelp is not trying to be like that strategic, like very strong, this is this is what you're able to do on your turn, and you have to work within these realms. It feels like Kelp is a lot more free-flowing. You have to kind of go with the flow more, whereas Ironwood is very much you have to start setting a plan, and you have to do that plan. Like, you have to wax some, you have to, like, put out some fires as they come through.
Right.
Wax some moles of people trying to return their family heirlooms back to the forest or whatever.
The indigenous people are asking for their artifacts back.
They're asking for some heirlooms. I'm trying to build a mine.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to get some profit going. That's your ancestral mine.
Yeah.
Well, the third pillar of the two-player games that we played, which we played even more than this, but to me, the third one that is another really hot game right now is Duel for Middle-earth, which is kind of like a 1.5 edition of Seven Wonders Duel. Mm-hmm. It is close enough to Seven Wonders Duel that you could say to someone, all right, pick a theme and go with that one. But if you had no preference on theme and you were purely looking at the mechanics, then I would say go for Duel for Middle-earth, because it does just a little bit more, and the designers were able to kind of put some retroactive thought into the design on how they wanted to improve upon what is already widely accepted as one of the best two-player dedicated games ever made.
Yeah.
And that one has no asymmetry, and even less than Seven Wonders Duel proper, because in the original Seven Wonders Duel, you would lay claim to these are my four wonders at the start. The Duel for Middle-earth, you're like, well, there's going to be these landmarks that you can claim during the game. So there's no asymmetry in it, aside from just a couple little whiffs of things that strategically might come up.
You start off slightly differently on the board.
Right.
Like
exactly.
Your meeples just don't start in the exact same spot, but that's all that there is. And I think that it does a really good job. This is the thing I've noticed in a handful of two-player games where it's... Mm-hmm. It sets out like 3 different tug-of-wars, and it's whoever wins 2 of them wins. And not all. That's definitely not every two-player game, but that is like a lot of them do that. Seven Wonders Duel does that. We played King of Tokyo Duel, which also did something similar, where it's like there's 3 different avenues to victory, and if you do well at 2 of them, you will win. And I feel like Duel for Middle-earth had that, but then it also had like a 4th and a 5th lane that you had to battle in. And it was just like, you're battling on the board and also battling for points and also battling to catch you on this track and also just trying to get as much money as possible, because money is very scarce in that game. And it just ended up being I fully agree that it is if I had to choose between Seven Wonders Duel or Duel for Middle-earth, agnostic of the fact that we're both big Tolkien fans, Duel for Middle-earth is the better implementation. And that's saying something, considering Seven Wonders Duel is like very widely regarded one of the best two-player board games.
Easily. And so, thinking about all 3 of these games together, as well as so many other two-player games, I was trying to think in preparation for this podcast, like, what's the commonality? Why do I love these games so much when there are a lot of really good higher player count games that work well at 2 players?
Yeah.
And my predominant gaming is 2 players with my wife or with a friend, with Eric coming up. But there's something, some special sauce, some mustard that's put on some really good 2-player games. And I think it's because when you have that specific player count in mind, you can design to it and around the various systems very precisely
Yeah.
to create a lot of tension. And that's what we all want in games, or most people tend to want in games, is they want to feel like there's a lot of tension, that things are balanced in ways that, sure, they may be very different. There may be asymmetry. There may not be. There may be, some cards that are better than others that you can lay claim to. But nonetheless, the various permutations of board state can be accounted for as part of the design, and that becomes harder and harder when you're trying to think of what's going on at 2 players and 3 players and 4 players and all the way up to 6 or 7. And I think that's why Seven Wonders proper, to me, is like, it's an okay game. If someone wants to play Seven Wonders, sure, but it's nowhere near the top 10 favorite games of all time for me. But Seven Wonders Duel already was there, and I like Duel for Middle-earth even a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
It's because of that tension. It feels so good.
Yeah. And I think that kind of the note of the designer can like fully focus on, this is the player experience that you're going to have, and can like lock a lot of things down because of that, does allow for a lot more smart design choices, and like kind of fewer compromises to make it work for more than 2 players. And I think that one of the things that I really like about all 3 of those games is, because it's just the 2 players, it really feels like I can focus more on what's actually happening, because there's only one other person I have to keep track of. There's only one other like thing that I need to know what's going on. What is going on over there? I don't need to know, like, in theory with like Seven Wonders Duel, if there was like a 3rd player, I would have to start being like, oh, can I leave that card for 2 other people's turn to get back to me? And it also makes the decision space for the players a lot more focused, which I feel like allows you to become a lot more engaged in the game. Now, that's not to say that you can't be engaged with more than 2 players, but that's like some of the reasons why having a game that is specifically designed for 2 players can be a better implementation of a system.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about mutual focus, that it's easier to find someone who is going to be able to kind of be in simpatico with you when it comes to like a 2-player game and really reap the most out of a system, whereas the likelihood that there's imbalance either in investments or what people are trying to get out of a game or skill levels increases with each added player to a player count. That's not to say that everyone has to be the same skill level when you play 3 or 4 player games, but it does invite other social things like king making, like someone who is non-aggressive versus someone who is much more aggressive. 2-player games are much more like, hey, this is how you're going to play the game, and you got to meet it at its level, and you're either going to succeed or you're not. So I think that naturally works well for identifying what type of gaming people want to get to the table. Yeah.
So with that, I think going through some games that we do enjoy, like this is not going to be like a list. That's going to be a different video.
Sure.
But just we've both written out a lot of 2-player games that we have. Some of them are going to be ones we've enjoyed. Some of them are going to be ones that we are tepid on at best. I'm specifically looking at this one that I'm highlighting. I don't know if Jack can see it. We'll loop back to that one.
I am.
But we have a lot of 2-player games. Jack and I used to do like a Friday board game lunch, and we got a lot of these 2-player games played. So kind of what I think works really well for a two-player game, and one that I would like to just make note of in terms of like, these are things that I'm going to, if I experience them in a two-player game, really enjoy, is the feeling that you are in like a knife fight constantly with the other person, where you're constantly having to interact with them in a way that is going to be very raising the tension. So one game that I just think exemplifies this best, that we played at like one of our first Friday board game lunches, was Radlands, and that game is just so much every decision you make feels like it is such an important decision, because everything you're doing is going to greatly affect the state of the board, that because there's only one other person, you can really focus down on, what do I need to do to beat Jack right now?
I think the timing element is so perfect in Radlands, and I don't think that would work very successfully at any higher player counts. The way that you set up your raids and other events that either take 1, 2, or 3 turns to scoot towards completion, giving the other player time to react is so smart, and just gives this sort of pressure, which again is that tension. Radlands scratches a bunch of other itches, like you were a big Yu-Gi-Oh player, I was a big Magic and L5R player, so the idea of kind of feeling like a CCG without having to deal with the whole bananas business of investing in CCGs is really nice. But yeah, Radlands does have that kind of cool pressure and mounting tension. The knife fight immediately made me think of the Beat It music video, where the guys have their arms roped together and they got their switchblades and they're dancing and everything. So perfect. And
is that a reference point you use a lot?
Oh yeah,
the Beat It music video.
I mean, why wouldn't I? It's one of the greatest music videos of all time.
It was at the grocery store. You turn to Christina. You know what this reminds me of? The Beat It music video.
Hey, if you need me to break out my red leather jacket with zippers everywhere, then
do you have one of those?
So be it. No, I don't.
Okay.
Why'd you call me on that?
I was really surprised.
You just humiliated me in front of our entire
I wanted
audience.
it to be true. I wanted it to be true is where it was at. I was like,
maybe
I really
someday
hope Jack
we can make it
that.
true.
Yeah, that'll be... If you subscribe to the Patreon, maybe Jack can afford the red jacket.
That's content creator goals right there.
That's going to be the hardest sell we have for the Patreon.
Well, Radlands is a great entry point into something that I was thinking about for like what I think two-player games can do really well. Even though I don't play a ton of these, I think because of the history of gaming in human civilization with like Go and chess and checkers, these super symmetric abstract games are really something that two-player games explore a lot. There's things like Shobu. We recently played Iliad and Icor. Then there's Santorini is one of my all-time favorites. Like these games that hunger at being abstract, super pristinely polished duelers that in some ways have this kind of like pompous air about them, like, oh, we're not one of those other heavily thematic games. We are enlightened and above all the rest of the games. But they do them really well. Even though I don't typically like that level of fine-tuning and polish in my games, but you know, what's your take on this? Like Hive is another example of
Hive I have written down. I think I enjoy those games to a point. I think that I really appreciate what they're doing. I will also say the ones that like really stick out to me are the ones with like the really high production value as well. Like it feels so good to move a hive piece around. It feels really good to fiddle with the pieces in Shobu. And I think that I have gotten a lot of fun out of those games. I think for me, the biggest takeaway with those games is you have to be at the same level as the other player. Like,
Right.
you have
Yeah.
to be at a similar experience level and skill level to play against somebody. Otherwise, they're just going to win or lose every time, because those games reward repeated play a lot more, because there is like not a ton of randomness. Like, I know exactly what we all start with the same pieces in Hive. We all start with the same board in Shobu.
It's
And
kind of a catch-22 because like you want a game that has enough depth that it feels really rewarding to invest in, but because of the type of gaming that we do, like I don't think people are as dedicated to their Shobu experience as they may be to Go. And so, like, if you're a person who's playing Shobu, you're probably also playing 100 other games a year, or, you know, at least 20 other games a year. So you're not going to be some Zen master at Shobu. And therefore, you want it to be something that's palpable to someone who's just a hobbyist, an occasional gamer. And as such, you're not going to want the uber high skill ceiling either. I think Santorini, in some ways, kind of is emblematic of this in the best and worst ways, in that I've taught Santorini to kids, and kids can do really well at it, but then that also makes me question, like, what is the skill ceiling on Santorini? Like, you're not going to have chess grandmasters pooling over Santorini and going like,
Well,
oh, the amount of different openings that you could do in this game. I think it's a very clever game. I think it's a very smart game, and I think that it's a game that if you have played it a few times or you have a mind that works well for it, you're going to have an advantage. But there's only so much that you can really do with the game, and then it's just kind of like taking advantage of the tactical scenario in front of you. Are people who really love that sort of chess and Go type of thing going to still feel attracted to something that, you know, a 10-year-old who has played it 15 times knows the majority of capabilities of what you can do?
I see you've done the Noxos defense. Very well played. Very well played.
Right.
I think that it is a bit of a catch-22 where these games, for not all of them, but for like some of them, the skill ceiling feels very limitless, and it's just how much time are you going to put into it. And that's an amount of depth that is something that is admirable. But in a similar way to like chess, that also plays into, it's either your skill ceiling is effectively limitless, and therefore people have to be at similar skill levels to have an enjoyable game. And for me, I feel like that just is, it's a little bit hit or miss. Now, there are things that will let you randomize it a little bit. Like, I do think Iliad and Icor both have like they have a little bit of, just because we reviewed them recently, they have a little bit of randomness to them that helps offset that. And I mean, that is like one of the great things about randomness in board game design, is it levels out where you can be at different skill ceilings because you haven't experienced this exact scenario before. Like, if you're playing Iliad, you don't know exactly where you don't know what pieces your opponent has, you don't know what pieces you have, so you don't quite know where best to place them on the side of the board.
Yeah, you don't have perfect information.
Exactly, and the fact that you don't have perfect information does allow you to play people with different skill levels and still have a good time. And I think that's something that I really want out of a two-player game, is the better player wins most of the time, but it is not impossible for a less experienced player to win. Like, I want it to still be enjoyable no matter what. So, for example, I think that So You've Been Eaten, which I talked about earlier, is a 2-player game that I've played. I think the amount of experience that you have is... You will probably win more frequently, but that doesn't mean that you're going to win every single time.
Right.
And I think there are a couple games that we have listed out here that are similar, where it's, I think that the player who has played more of this game is at an advantage, but it's not so overwhelmingly so that it is, like, foolish to play. Don't bet money on it.
Right. I think, as far as things that I want to see out of 2-player games, I already mentioned that tension earlier, like, that's the high that I'm chasing. And I think what that really comes down to is the decision that I make has massive ramifications for the other players at the table, or at least has the capacity to be that. And I like a lot of multiplayer solitaire games, but rarely are those the 2-player games that I'm playing, the dedicated 2-player games. Like,
yeah.
I played a lot of 2-player Wingspan. I love it. It's great. But rarely is the bird that I'm putting down going to have a meaningful impact on what someone else is doing on their turn.
Yeah.
Whereas almost every one of these 2-player games, what they can deliver is a much more meaningful experience, where what you do is going to either inform the options that someone else is going to have, or it's going to inform the strategic decision that they're going to be making. And that can come in forms of either cooperative or competitive games. A great example of this is the transition from Splendor to Splendor Duel, which, again, Splendor for me is it's a good game. Like, I can get down on some Splendor, but Splendor Duel is an excellent game, and that's just taking a few of the concepts from the original Splendor and then making it so everything is driven down to opportunity cost. What I do on my turn, I know I am presenting an opening for my opponent to take the thing that I really wanted, and suddenly that ramps up the tension. But even cooperative games are the same way. Sail or Sky Team, everything that you do on your turn is reverberating with your opponent, or in that
your friend,
that case, your partner, your friend, your co-pilot. And 2-player games do that better, I think, than any other type of game. And so I always want to see that. If there's a flabby 2-player dedicated game, I don't want it. I don't want it. I need something that's taut.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing both of us want out of 2-player games is you are forced to interact with the other person you're playing with. Every single round is you are doing something that will either help them, hurt them, or hurt you, or help you. Like, but very dedicated. Every single turn, something has to happen where you are changing the game state so much because it is just the two of you.
Or it has the capacity to do that. There are going to be some turns in Seven Wonders Duel where, like, you do something and it's like, okay, great, well, I'll just do what I was going to do.
I'm going to take this card, and that's the only card I can take, so that's what I got.
But that game has a different arc where overall you're kind of seeing the progression of what your opponent's doing, and that's going to evolve your overall progression. There's the moment-to-moment decisions, which are informed by what you do, but it also you have the broader strategy that you're cultivating alongside your opponent. If they're leaning heavy into military, you can only ignore it for so long until that becomes the most important decision that you're making, is denying your opponent those military cards. And I think that the best 2-player games are aware that you can prescribe certain game states, that you can design to certain game states in ways that higher player counts just don't have the capacity to do that. The other thing that I think that 2-player games really do well from a thematic standpoint is they give you a high contrast opposition.
Yeah.
And so we talked about kelp, shark versus octopus, like predator and prey. That's great. We talked about things like ironwood. You got the oppressive mining society, and then you also have the oppressed population that was indigenous to the forest valleys, pressed out, and now they're trying to reclaim their ancestral artifacts. I think Votes for Women is a great example of a killer 2-player game where it's almost ludicrous and would be unbelievable if it's not actually verifiable history, just how terrible of a situation and heavily contrasted the patriarchy is versus the suffragette movement. And it just works really well to create these dynamic sides that are in opposition but constantly weaving together. And 2-player games can do that in ways that games at higher player counts, they kind of have to account for so many different intersections that you can't have these clear sides of opposition in a thematic sense.
Yeah, and I think that there's the asymmetry can like show up in so many different ways, but that, oh boy, does that asymmetry of slow moving behemoth versus quick moving tiny guy. Oh, that's a good asymmetry right there. And I think that there's a lot of ways to do asymmetry in a way that is rewarding. I think having systems that are parallel to one another, or even if it's the same system but just implemented or looked at from a different viewpoint. So one that I see on the list that I do just feel like bringing up in here is, in Undaunted, you have like the same kinds of crew. Now, on each mission, you might have different crew available to you in your specific team, but most of the time you have the same like 4 or 5 kinds of troops that you can use. You and your opponent both do a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time. But it's, you have such starkly different starting points and such different goals that it is, you have to use them in different ways. And the asymmetry there comes more from what are your goals? And I think that if you're gonna have asymmetry, having like opposing goals where it's, they might not be the exact same thing, they might not be the exact opposite thing, but just having it be things that you're forced to interact with one another to achieve those goals with 2-player asymmetry.
It's a good call on Undaunted. Man, I didn't even write that on my list. God,
yeah, I know. I wrote that one down.
So much.
That was me.
Yeah. Yep. There you go.
It's me. You're welcome, everybody.
Trevor and DJ are just going to be in tears over Jack letting them down on this one.
I think the invitation to their birthday party has been rescinded from you, Jack.
That's terrible. That said, I brought up flabbiness as something that I don't want to see. Which, let me be clear, as, part of the larger persuasion, is meant strictly in a tension sense. But the what doesn't work in 2-player games for you? Like, do you have any thoughts? Like,
yeah, I think that if you're going to have asymmetry, one, having asymmetry that feels like I don't have to actually interact with what you're doing, or like we're playing our own separate solitaire game, feels not great. And I think with two players, like, again, what we want out of it is I want to interact with the person I'm playing with.
Yeah.
And I think that there are games where the asymmetry just doesn't quite hit because you're not actually interacting with your opponent. But I think more than anything is I want to be able to know what's going on. Like, I want to be able to know what you're doing and what I'm doing, which is one of the reasons why, like, I think that the asymmetry in kelp and ironwood works really well, because I generally know what you're doing. I don't need to, like, know a completely different rule set that doesn't interact with what I'm doing to understand, like, what you are capable of doing. I don't want to have to feel like I have to learn two different games to know what's going on. So one game that I have written down here as an example of this is Cthulhu Wars Duel. The asymmetry just feels so convoluted to the point that I still feel like I had a reasonably fun time playing it, but I was just like, that was like an experience. I don't really want to ever do that again, even though I just took all of that time to learn the rules. Where the asymmetry just felt like I had to learn a completely different game to play the game that I'm playing.
Yeah, I think the asymmetry here is a trap, and some games do it well, some don't. And I agree. Cthulhu Wars Duel seems like where the enjoyment of the game itself is just the novelty of what the faction is.
Yeah.
Whereas how it overlaps with the other faction that's part of the box. And there were a couple boxes, and probably Peterson Games had like a bajillion more planned and then collapsed because they were running their Kickstarters like Ponzi schemes. But, you know, with Cthulhu Wars Duel, it became too much to grasp how you could meaningfully interact with the opponent and become an obstacle with the opponent, which, you know, they were chasing kind of the root thing, and root wasn't nearly as obtuse to me, whereas this just kind of felt like it was cool, and I liked the concepts, and I liked the lore, but it never felt like I knew what the right decisions were going to be to strategically provide opposition to my opponent.
Yeah.
And as such, when that novelty wore off of the faction itself, it was like, okay, well, you know, I've seen what the game has to offer, and it didn't inspire a lot of hope for mixing and matching the other Cthulhu War sets, or the Cthulhu War Duel sets. That was a confusing premise in general, what Peterson Games was going for. I think Ironwood was really susceptible to this as well, where, you know, like, it is really cool to see these two factions play against each other, and they are so cool and distinct that it makes you want to see other factions in the game. And there are no alternatives in the box, but they were designed so precisely with one another that if what you're going into that is the novelty of seeing interesting mashups, you're going to grow tired of the game right away. Yeah. It's fortunate that it has this kind of like capture the flag versus tower defense element that gives it strategic meat and replayability. But I think that's a game which could do with even a little bit more variance within the two factions that are in the game.
Yeah.
Like, I think different leaders or something would be kind of cool. Something that I'm always adverse to in a two-player game is just obvious board states. Like that's the, I guess, the biggest pitfall with two-player games to me is that ultimately, if you have this narrow player count, then if it feels inevitable that something's going to happen, or you feel like, oh, I've done this before 1,000 times, and the decisions that I'm making in this moment don't feel interesting, then it just kind of feels lame. Skull Hollow was a game that kind of felt this way, which at face value, it doesn't seem like it's going to be that. It's one player is the big hulking beast, and the other player is, these little factions that are trying to climb on top of it and defeat it.
Yeah.
But it felt like the conclusion of that game was always predictable. Not necessarily who was going to win, but it just kind of felt like, oh, I'm doing the same motions that I've done every game before. I'm not being presented with like, oh, I'm going to chase after this time, or I'm going to try to capitalize on this strategy. It just felt like I was seeing the same movie in loop, and two-player games can be really susceptible to that if you haven't smartly designed around it.
Yeah, and I feel like they're... With some of the abstract games we were talking about earlier, the beginner learner curve of, oh, this feels like the obvious thing to do, it does make the first few times playing some of those games like, oh, cool, and then after that you're like, oh, I have no clue. I don't know how to get better at this.
Right.
For like Hive, where it's like you want to put your little bug on top of the other guy's queen, so that way he can't move his queen, and then you'll just build around it, and then you capture it, and that's it. And that is the one move that I feel like every person learning Hive does right out of the gate, every single time. Every time.
Right.
Where it's you grasshopper all the way across, trap the queen that way, put a pill bug on top, or not pill bug, I forget what it is. It's been a little bit since I've played Hive. But the one that goes on top of other bugs. And then build around. And I feel like there are some very obvious board states with those abstract games that maybe that's also one of the reasons why I'm generally not the biggest fans of them.
It almost feels like a hobby apart from a lot of what brings us to different board games, like the hobbyist modern board game thing. But, I think with the best of those games, you're presented with situations where you're in the same board state and your opponent is in the same board state, but then you're empowered to do things that feel like you're at least trying to outwit your opponent, right? Like, well, we've been here before, but this time I'm going to do this because you're expecting me to do that. And I think that's what people who play chess get out of that game. I think that's what people who play Go get out of that. And the best of these feel like, like you reach that simpatico where you can play off of one another. And I think that's probably that parallel skill depth that you were talking about earlier, or parallel skill level. With these two-player games, do you see a clear indicator that the favorite games for you to play at two players tend to be games that are dedicated two-player games, or are you going for different vibes here?
So I think that in a vacuum, if I know I'm going to be playing at a two-player count, I feel like that's always a really good time to bring out these really great board games that are two players only that I enjoy and want to play more of. I would love if I'm like, oh, I know that it's just going to be Jack and I. Let's play some Kelp. Let's play some Ironwood or Sky Team. Sky Team is one that I feel like we only touched on, but that made our top 10 list last year. Like, that's clearly a
It's so
two-player
good.
game that is like,
I've been playing a bunch of it recently.
if you're going to be playing 2 players, like if you're going to be playing a game at 2 players, it makes a ton of sense to play these 2-player games in a vacuum. But the thing that I always find is I'm playing with people who maybe don't, like, I'll go ahead and say, like, my wife has a tendency to want to play games she already knows. And
Right.
I usually show her games in, like, a group setting. So we're playing games like Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition or Harmonies, or Ascension or Clank. These are the games that we've started out playing in a group setting, and now she really enjoys those games. Like, those are some of her favorite games, and I feel like I end up playing a lot of those games because she's my permanent second player now. Again, she still is. She was before, now she still is. But
It's
I
like
end up
Mitch
playing these
Hedberg.
games.
I used to do drugs. I still do
still
drugs,
do.
but I used to do them too.
But I think that I now play a lot of games that I have played in a larger group setting that still just play really well at 2 players. And I think there are a lot of games that, even if they're not built specifically for 2 players, the draw to play those games that was there at 4 players or 3 players is still there at 2 players. Like, I think the engine building of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition is still awesome at 2 players. Maybe even better, because then you can start, like, trying to... I feel like you're more able to say, oh, what do I think my opponent is trying to do this turn? Like, you can start actually focusing and being like, oh, I actually don't want to... I'm not going to play this phase because I think she's going to do this phase. So I'm going to actually do something different, so I can get, like, a double dip. I think that some parts of Ares Expedition becomes a lot stronger at 2 players than it does at 3 or 4 players. And likewise, there are parts of it that are way better at 3 and 4 players than it is at 2 player. But I think that there are a lot of games that just happen to play really great at 2 players, even if that's not what they were. That's not their peak.
Right. I find that the intensity of a 2-player game, like a dedicated 2-player game, is not always what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like, whether it's cooperative or it's competitive, there's a certain semblance of, like, I have to be a very engaged and active participant in this game for it to feel meaningful for my opponent.
Yeah.
Whereas Ares Expedition is a great example of, I have my sandbox, you have your sandbox. This can be great at 2 players. I can derive the enjoyment of just seeing my sandbox come to fruition, and my decisions are impacting my opponent, and like, we are competing over one another, but it's so much detached from the, like, level of intensity that Seven Wonders Duel, for example, would have, where your decisions are making a big impact on someone else, and there's even a level of responsibility in being a good opponent in those games that sometimes you don't want to, like, oh man, I'm just not feeling it, and I know that I wouldn't give you the right pressure that you need in order to feel that. Whereas playing something that's a little more detached, Wingspan, Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition, or even like Castles of Burgundy is a great game that the things that my wife takes from the board, I am going to be very upset that she took the set of 4 cows that I was gunning for, that she took the mine when she had the opportunity to. But nonetheless, it feels like in some of those games, you are as much being challenged by the game system as you are being challenged by your opponent, and it creates a softer environment, I think. So it can be a different vibe.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, oh, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say that I think that it's a different experience, and I think that it also is. I fully agree where there's less pressure on you to provide like the right amount of adversity, because like in a 2-player game, like if you're kind of winging it in kelp or ironwood, that is maybe going to be a pretty not fulfilling win for the other player. Like if you're just phoning it in and they just go, oh, I kind of did everything I needed to do, and I didn't really
let me tell you,
fight.
Nothing is going to create a marital battle like someone not being entirely focused on a game of Sail. You know,
Ooh.
if I'm putting down tricks that you need to be picking up, and you ain't really bringing your A game on that, then someone is going to get angry at the other person. There's going to be, even in the best kindest circumstances, there's going to be some level of passive aggression that's happening, and you know, like, not everyone wants that on a Tuesday night after work.
And I think that there's a lot of games that can let you, kind of as you said, be in your own sandbox where you are like, I can get enjoyment and fulfillment out of this game, and while it might not be like the same level of tension that other 2-player games are going to be able to give me, there's still going to be a lot of enjoyment out there for it. So like I put down Ascension. That is a game that my wife and I have played a ton, and it is realistically the only interaction me and my wife have playing that is what cards are available in the market, and occasionally we destroy each other's constructs, but that is like, right. Realistically, I'm building my own deck, she's building her deck, and there's opportunity cost of like churning the market for the other player and like trying to make sure you get the cards you want without like revealing 3 or 4 new cards for your opponent to grab. But similarly, there is just like, I can kind of be doing something else while playing. Like I can be thinking about other things or like writing something down and be like, okay, it's my turn. What am I doing? What's the market at right now? Oh, okay, cool. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm doing right now. Okay, cool, done. I think that there's a lot of games that play really well at 2 players that are not necessarily 2-player inherent games. They might not be as tight. But there's...
Well, some of them I think play best at 2.
I agree.
Arc Nova is a great example of a game that having additional players provides me nothing more than the 2-player experience of the game. So to me, Arc Nova is ideal for 2 players. Extra players just means more time in between me and building the zoo of my dreams.
Yes.
So forget everyone else. Let's just have a great 2-player experience in playing Arc Nova, and that can be the type of gaming that I want in a night, and it is nowhere near as tense as some of these 2-player games, which are often much shorter. But, you know, like, sure, I could play Arc Nova 3 or 4 players, but I still am going to have the best peak experience with that at 2 players.
Yeah.
Personally, Spirit Island is this way for me.
I agree.
think peak Spirit Island is 2-player or 2 Spirit if you're playing solo and you have and you want to do double-handed.
Which is the way to do
players, it. I think, well, we can disagree on that, but you know,
well,
I when I solo Spirit Island, I don't like dual handing things. So
see, to me,
in almost
that's
any
like,
solo game,
that's for Spirit Island.
Too big
for
brain.
Spirit Island specifically, that to me is where I'm like, oh, that gets to the point where I feel like I can affect everything on the board in a meaningful way, but then it's like, oh, but how do I actually make this work between both of them? I think it becomes a lot easier with the app, the Spirit Island app,
right,
where it's like, oh, I can see what's currently being affected, because at some point or another you can get lost, but
yeah, I think that's I'm a victim of my laziness in that, because I recognize that the intersection of the two spirits is what makes Spirit Island so beautiful, or multiple spirits in any case. However, it's too big brain for me to feel like I'm up for that. I love Spirit Island so much that I'll play it solo and just single spirit it to really familiarize and challenge and see if I can just like juice everything I can out of one spirit. However, peak experience to me is 2-player Spirit Island. And then, like there are a lot of games where, sure, there may be competitive elements where additional players may make it a more complex game or a different flavor of a game. But a lot of worker placement games, Agricola, Lords of Waterdeep, I guess Marco Polo 2 would be a great example. I just like them at 2 players. I don't need the extra player count. That's the right amount of opposition that I need for those. There are a lot of great games that play best at higher player counts, but typical standard midweight Euro, I'm here for the 2-player mode.
Yeah. I think that there are a lot of games where we'll kind of go through them when we get to our video that is just like our top 10, but I think that there's a lot of games where just the additional players passed to does not contribute to enjoyment in a way that is fulfilling. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. We both kind of have put forth our thoughts of what we're looking for in 2-player games and what we kind of don't enjoy, just to give a little bit of context and also just to kind of have this discussion in a more conversational way. We will be doing a 2-player top 10 at some point in the near future, so keep an eye out for that. But we just kind of wanted to get out a little bit of our thought going into that video in a way that would be maybe a good introductory
an appetizer
point. Yeah, a good introductory point for people who are like saying, oh, well, I just watched the top 10 video, why did they not put Hive on there? We might, I don't know if we are, but like this might be a way for us to be like, this is the context we are approaching it from. Why didn't they put Cthulhu Wars Duel on there? There's going to be a lot of comments on asking about Cthulhu Wars Duel, I'm pretty sure. Sandy
Peterson is going to be coming after us, saying, why is it not on there? I think this is also good to help me codify my own thoughts as well. That's part of why I liked this idea of doing this is, this is the deliberations, so to speak. We're not setting anything in stone, but now, after having this conversation with you, I'm starting to think about okay, maybe I do feel this way about this, or you're challenging me to make a better, more authentic list, Eric.
Well, you're welcome, Jack. That is where we're going to be ending this podcast today. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. If you are interested in what 2-player games we might have and want to comment yours, please feel free to do so down below. If you want to comment and just give us any questions you have about 2-player games that we can follow up on in a different video, let us know. Or if you just have other comments or thoughts that you want us to answer in a future podcast, feel free to comment on whatever platform you're on, or feel free to email in at cardboardherald@gmail.com. We'll be able to find us there, or find us at cardboardherald.com. That's also a spot where I think there's a contact us form on there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I have been Eric with the Cardboard Herald, along with Jack.
Bye. I'm here and I'm leaving. Bye.